They shot my brother in the streets of Los Angeles. I kept quiet that day, but I took down that gang by pretending to defend them. Now they're all in federal prison. My name is Marcus D. Riley. I'm 35 years old. I graduated from New York University School of Law. Today, I'm a federal prosecutor, but law isn't just a career for me. It's the most refined form of revenge. I embarked on this path with my brother Jaylen's blood. He was only 16 years old. His dream was to become an NBA star, but he lost his life on a street corner in Los Angeles, caught in the midst of drug gangs. It was 2003, South Los Angeles. The night had just begun, but the streets were already shrouded in darkness. That night, it wasn't just the sun that set. It was also the future of a child. My brother Jaylen was a 16-year-old high school student. He had big dreams. Even at that age, he would go out for a morning run and spend hours practicing at the basketball hoop. He had one goal, to one day play in the NBA. But his dream spilled onto the asphalt that night, with his blood. That night, while walking home from school, he stumbled upon a gang's drug deal in an alley. He shouldn't have been there, but Jaylen's only crime was passing by. A split-second glance, an exchange of eyes, and the Crimson Fangs gang declared him a witness. And witnesses didn't live long in this neighborhood. I heard gunshots. When I ran to that street, people had scattered. And there, my brother Jaylen was writhing in a pool of blood. There was still a look of shock on his face, as if he were saying, "Bro, what happened to me?" I held his hand, he looked into my eyes, and then he stopped moving. The police arrived. Yellow tape was put up. Questions were asked, but there were no answers. I only heard one sentence from the detective. Wrong time, wrong place. For me, that wasn't an answer. It was an insult. We recounted the incident. There was evidence. There were witnesses. There were camera recordings, but the case was left to rot on the shelf because the man at the head of that gang, Deshaun Viper Cole, wasn't just a criminal. He was a former U.S. Marine. He had killed enemies on the battlefield, and now he was killing dreams in the neighborhood, and no one in this city dared to say a word against him. That night, my mother was crying, clinging to Jaylen's body. She was on the ground. Jaylen's blood was on her hands and face, but she didn't even notice. She was just whispering, "Get up, son. Come on, get up." As if this were a nightmare and he would wake up. But I was just watching. I was silent. I didn't cry, because something inside me had snapped. I wasn't mourning. I was starting a war. At that moment, I swore, if there was such a thing as justice in this world, I would build it with my own hands. Despite everyone who tried to teach me the law, I would memorize revenge like the law. My brother's blood would be written into the laws. With Jaylen's death, I didn't just lose a brother. My purpose in life was rewritten. After my brother was targeted by bullets on that street, I could have been the target of those bullets too, but I wasn't the target. I became the hand that held the gun, and the name of that gun was law. My first decision, I would study law, but I knew justice wasn't in the textbooks. I received a scholarship from Harvard. I didn't accept it, because it would only teach me the laws. But I didn't want to kill with those laws. I wanted to seek accountability for the dreams that had been killed. I went to New York. I would grow up in a city where dirty, tough and warrior-like people lived, a city that knew the veins of the system. New York University, School of Law. In my first year, I lived alone. I worked at night and attended classes in the morning, but grades, exams, and prestige didn't matter to me. There was only one thing that mattered to me: to destroy the Crimson Fangs gang. If you want to defeat your enemy, you must first think like them. I studied their world. I focused on how they laundered money, how they silenced witnesses, and which loopholes they exploited. Money laundering, tax evasion, the chain of evidence. I used the law not as a shield, but as a weapon, cold, precise, and deadly. After graduating, I received offers from big firms. I turned them down because I wanted to defend criminals, but to get close to them. I became a lawyer for street thugs in small cases. On the surface, it seemed like I was working with them to make money. But in reality, I was gathering information and building a network. Slowly, I got closer to the lawyers of the Crimson Fangs. One day it happened. One of Deshaun Viper Cole's men reached out to me. "The boss heard about you. They say you're a finisher," he said. "They put me on a small case to test me. I pretended to give a good defense, but in reality, I was following the chain of evidence and sending notes pointing to bigger crimes to the FBI. And then, the offer came directly from Deshaun Cole himself. Will you be my lawyer? That day, the phone in my hand trembled, because the man who had executed my brother in the street 16 years ago now trusted me. I said, of course, I'll do whatever it takes to protect your family. And I said it because I was loyal to my own brother, not his family. Now I was one of them. I was sitting at the same table as Deshaun. I was listening to their drug routes, learning their money laundering systems. Every piece of information turned into a file, secretly sent to the FBI. But I was careful, because if I made one mistake, my brother's killers would sacrifice me in the middle of the street too. My weapon was no longer a gun. It was signatures, records, and chains of evidence. They called me our guy, but with every trustworthy statement, I pulled another brick from beneath them, and eventually that building would collapse under its own weight. This wasn't just revenge. It was an individual war plan executed like a state operation. And I was no longer just a man. I was a shadow prosecutor writing justice in the silence of a grave for his brother. The year is 2024. The location, Los Angeles Federal Court. It took exactly 21 years. I was 14 years old when my brother's blood stained that asphalt. Today, I am bringing the man who stained that street with blood to justice. Deshaun Cole and 27 members of his gang were arrested in an early morning. FBI operation. Raids were carried out on their clubs, homes, and even their girlfriends' places. I didn't participate in the operation because I was waiting for a bigger stage. The courtroom. That day, Deshaun still didn't understand what was happening. He thought I was still his lawyer, that I was still writing him a get-out-of-jail-free card. I was still by his side. But when he entered the courtroom in handcuffs, the judge stood up and said, "Prosecutor Marcus D. Riley, you may read the indictment." There was an icy silence in the courtroom. Deshaun turned and looked at me. For the first time, there was fear in his eyes. I stood up. I opened my file, and I read the first sentence of the 76-page indictment. This case has been brought on behalf of Jaylen Riley, a 16-year-old who was murdered in 2003. At that moment, everything that had been building up inside me for years poured out. Anger, pain, silence, revenge, it all turned into words. And it hit Deshaun Cole like a slap in the face. Throughout the trial, I presented every piece of evidence. Video recordings, money trails, witness statements. Everything was meticulously planned, because this wasn't just a case. This was my reason for living. And finally, the verdict was announced. The defendant, Deshaun Cole, is sentenced to life imprisonment for organized crime, murder, money laundering, threats, and obstruction of justice. I was still standing there, straight as an arrow. My eyes were filled with tears, but this time, for the first time, I wasn't afraid to cry, because my tears were no longer flowing from pain, but from victory. My brother Jaylen's name finally echoed within the walls of justice. Those who killed him were silenced, but Jaylen's voice now resonates in the hearts of thousands. Thank you for listening. This is not just my story. This is the story of everyone who has lost their voice. It is the story of everyone whose sibling was left on the streets. It is the truth that justice may come late, but it is never forgotten. If you too have witnessed justice being silenced, if you too are still burning inside for someone you lost, know this. Revenge sometimes comes not as a weapon, but as a robe. And sometimes the deepest wound becomes the greatest strength. If this story touched your heart, write just one word in the comments. Justice. Let's grow this word together. And to not miss out on more realistic revenge stories like this, subscribe. Because on this channel, justice is not just an idea, it's a reality.